Hi everyone, we're excited to have you join Registrar Corp for Unpacking US FDA Food Labeling and Ingredient Regulation, what companies must know before exporting. We'll be discussing the ingredient and labeling rules and regulations for food products distributed in the United States. I'm proud to introduce Anna Benavente, Registrar Corp's Director of Product, Labeling, and Ingredient Review, who will be leading this webinar. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from the College of William & Mary and has over 15 years of experience in analytical research. Since joining Registrar Corp in 2009, her team has reviewed over 13,000 products for FDA compliance. Throughout this webinar, feel free to write any questions in the Q&A box, and we've saved time at the end to answer them. We'll also follow up with a link to the recording so you can refer back to this at any time. Without any further ado, Anna, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm very excited to be able to present to you all today. These are the topics that we'll be covering in our webinar. First, we will discuss what every food company must know before they start exporting food products to the U.S., FDA's oversight of foods, and the two important questions that every company must ask related to their ingredients and their labels. In our next section, we'll describe how a company determines if their product's ingredients are okay. We'll go over how FDA regulates food ingredients and designates them as safe, and common mistakes made by food companies before they ship. We'll also discuss the new ban on FD&C Red number 3 and when this will go into effect. We'll follow up with the labeling requirements that all food labels must meet. All of the general mandatory labeling elements will be described, and we'll go over additional labeling considerations such as nutrient and organic claims, as well as some new guidance from FDA related to allergens. We will also discuss the new requirement for the claim that a product is quote-unquote healthy. We'll also touch upon the proposed rule FDA has issued regarding front-of-package labeling. Finally, we'll present to you Registrar Corp solutions to help your company achieve compliance and ensure trouble-free exportation to the U.S. We'll finish up with our question and answer period and try and get to them as many of them as we can. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Registrar Corp, we are a firm that specializes in FDA regulatory compliance with over 30,000 clients across 175 countries. We have 20 offices worldwide to assist our clients in their time zones and languages. We are very proud to have a high level of satisfaction from our clients and over 20 years of service to companies in the food, supplement, cosmetic, drug, and device industries. Our label review team of experienced professionals hold multiple advanced degrees in the areas of biology, chemistry, quality management, botany, human nutrition, pharmaceutical sciences, and cosmetic sciences. We have reviewed over 13,000 products for compliance and take enormous pride in ensuring that our clients meet FDA's requirements for food formulation and labeling. As most people know, the U.S. food market is incredibly large, with revenues of almost $1 trillion projected in 2025. For many companies, exportation to the U.S. is a significant way to increase the value and financial growth of their businesses. Companies that successfully export to the U.S. can often count upon a consistent revenue stream in a market that continues to expand. However, many pitfalls can occur between a company and its financial windfall in the U.S. market. FDA regulations are strict, and so a company must ask itself before it exports, what do I need to know? In the next section of this webinar, we'll describe how a company should ensure that its food products are appropriate for the U.S. market. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has jurisdiction over most foods in the U.S. market. Under their authority, they issue strict regulations regarding what ingredients may be used in food products. They also have complicated regulations that govern the labeling of food products. These regulations specify what must appear on the label, as well as rules regarding claims being made about the products. Many companies make the critical mistake of thinking that the FDA regulations only apply to domestic U.S. producers, but this is not the case. Imported foods must also comply with these regulations upon entry. FDA inspects foods in port and will not release products that have improper ingredients or labeling, even if the importer intends to change the label after it arrives. Products must be compliant when they arrive at that port of entry. So smart companies will ask themselves two important questions before shipping their food product to the US. One, are my ingredients permitted? Two, is the labeling correct? These two issues are extremely common causes for problems for imported foods in US ports. A company may ask itself why this matters. Many companies ship for years without any issues or inspections. However, it is important to note that FDA does conduct inspections in port, particularly on goods from new shippers. If a non-compliant product is found, it is usually detained. Rarely will FDA let non-compliant goods in with only a warning. If a product has an illegal ingredient, it will usually be refused entry, since there's no way to remove it from the product. Products with labeling errors can be relabeled if the importer petitions FDA successfully. However, this process is expensive and time-consuming, as FDA must approve the petition and then inspect the goods after relabeling. This process can take months to resolve and can easily damage your business relationships. Also, a package with stickers covering non-compliant information is not very attractive to a consumer and could negatively impact sales. Violations can result in a company being placed on import alert. All future shipments of the product will be detained without any inspection by FDA, and this can cripple your business in the US. The consequences of noncompliance can be extremely severe. So a few years ago, we assisted a large Swiss chocolate manufacturer who had 3 shipments of their chocolates stopped in early December. They were detained based on violations of the general labeling requirements that we are going to discuss today. They were destined for fancy department stores to be sold for the Christmas season. We submitted petitions to request permission to relabel on the company's behalf, but FDA did not respond for 2 months. It's important to understand that when you are detained, you are on their time clock, and FDA moves very slowly. Once approved, it took a few weeks to get stickers on all the packages, and then FDA took a few weeks to come out and confirm that they were now in compliance. They were released, but not until 4 months after they were initially detained. So the company missed the holiday shopping season and Valentine's Day as well, and it was a big blow to their business. Proper labels would have prevented this fiasco. We had a similar situation with a seasoning product that was labeled for the Chinese market and brought to the US by an importer interested in selling it here. FDA detained it for labeling violations, including the lack of a nutrition facts chart. FDA refused to accept the nutrient values from the manufacturer, though, and insisted that the products be tested by a US laboratory. They gave the importer a very short timeline to respond, so the importer was forced to pay for an expedited analysis by the lab before we could even begin to create the new label. The importer successfully relabeled the product, but FDA took a long time to come inspect the shipment, so the entire process took about 3 months. The takeaway here is that detentions are expensive, time-consuming, and a huge problem for a supply chain. They should be avoided at all costs. So how does one go about figuring out whether the products are okay or might be in danger of being detained? You have 2 basic steps to eliminate some of this risk. 1, is my formulation okay? Conduct a check of your ingredients to make sure that they are permitted in the US. Then select only those products with formulations that will be acceptable to FDA. 2, is my labeling okay? For these selected products, review the labeling and revise as necessary before shipping. Remember, relabeling in port is expensive and time-consuming if FDA even allows you to do it. Prevent the need for relabeling by making sure it's correct before you export. So many companies are uncertain as to how to determine if their ingredients are acceptable for the US market. In this section of the webinar, we'll explain how FDA regulates ingredients and where they publish the regulations. FDA has 3 classifications for ingredients: food additives, substances that are generally recognized as safe, also called GRAS, and color additives. By law, all substances added to food must be approved by FDA through the Food Additive Petition process, unless they are generally recognized as safe. GRAS substances are recognized as safe for their intended use by qualified experts, either through scientific procedures or through a history of use in food. Color additives, even those from natural sources, must all be approved by FDA. They are never considered GRAS. In order to figure out if your ingredients fall into one of these categories, you will need to research some specific resources. The U.S. Code of Federal Regulations includes all of the food additives and color additives that have been approved by FDA. It also includes regulations where FDA has affirmed certain substances are GRAS, or generally recognized as safe. It is important to pay close attention to these regulations as they will tell you exactly what products and intended uses are covered. For example, some are permitted generally in food, but others may be limited to only particular types of food or for certain specific uses. GRAS status is not limited to these FDA GRAS affirmations. GRAS status is based upon the opinion of the scientific community as a whole. So companies are permitted to self-affirm an ingredient as GRAS using data that is public or privately held. If a company chooses to self-affirm an ingredient as GRAS, then they should make sure that they have the data available in the event that FDA requests proof of their ingredient's status. FDA also has a process by which a company may submit what is called a GRAS notice to inform FDA that they have determined an ingredient is GRAS. FDA may then respond whether they have any questions or concerns regarding the company's data and conclusion that the substance is safe. Unfortunately, many companies don't perform any sort of compliance check on their products prior to shipping and find out the hard way that their ingredients are not permitted in the US market. One of the most common mistakes are illegal colors, because FDA must approve every color additive, even those from safe natural sources. Colors common in other markets, such as Ponceau 4R and Carmosine, are not permitted in the US. Other common color additive issues concern colors that are subject to a batch certification requirement from FDA. For these colors, a sample from the actual batch must be sent to FDA for them to test it. For example, Allura Red must be certified by FDA as FD&C Red number 40. Brilliant Blue SCF is another example. It must be certified as FD&C Blue number 1. Other ingredients that can cause issues are artificial sweeteners, such as cyclamates and dulcin, which are not approved by FDA. Recently, FDA issued a final order that essentially bans partially hydrogenated oils due to their trans fat content. Products from other markets where they are permitted should not be sent to the US. Stevia is an incredibly popular sweetener because it has natural origins, but FDA has purity specifications that have been outlined that must be met. FDA also has an import alert for it, along with other ingredients such as tamarind, where FDA will stop these products and force the importer to prove that they meet FDA's requirements before entering the US market. And finally, CBD. CBD is confusing because individual states in the US permit it, but at the federal level, it is not permitted to be added to food. Keeping up with ingredient regulations and doing a thorough check is extremely important, as regulations do change from time to time. For example, just this year, FDA has banned FD&C Red number 3, a common color additive that is used in all sorts of products such as candy. FDA is revoking the authorization and will enforce it beginning January 15, 2027 for food products. If you are using this color, you should start the reformulation process now to ensure that it is removed from all products destined for the US market. You will also want to ensure that your supply chain is vetted so that products containing this color do not accidentally get sent to the US. Once a company has determined that their products are formulated correctly for the US market, it's still incredibly important that the labeling be reviewed to ensure that it is compliant. The labeling is the first thing an FDA compliance officer will see when your product arrives in port. In this section of the webinar, we'll discuss the mandatory labeling requirements for food products. There are certain statements that must always appear on food labeling, as shown here, that we'll discuss in depth in the next few slides. First and foremost is the statement of identity, what the product actually is. FDA requires that it be the name specified by law, the common or usual name used in the marketplace, but not a brand name, or a fanciful name understood by the general public. So for example, most of us are probably familiar with the brand Oreo and understand what that is, but that's not a statement of identity. Oreo labels include a statement of identity, chocolate sandwich cookies, to meet this requirement and accurately identify the product. Some products are subject to what is called a standard of identity. This is when FDA dictates what the characteristics are for a product identified by a particular name. This can include permitted ingredients and certain manufacturing methods that must be conducted. Examples include ice cream, jam, margarine, and peanut butter. There are about 280 standards of identity, so you will want to determine if your product is subject to one. The statement of identity is also subject to special requirements based on flavor declarations, if they're juice ingredients, when a product is in a specific form like frozen, and more. The next mandatory statement we'll discuss is the net quantity of contents. You must declare the actual quantity of product in the container. You may not approximate. Solid and viscous products are declared by weight and must include the term or abbreviation for net weight. Liquid products are to be declared in terms of volume. In both cases, you must include both metric and imperial terms of measurement. This is another common cause for detention. For example, a product that declares its weight in grams but does not include the amount in ounces. The next and usually most difficult part of mandatory food labeling is the nutrition facts label. FDA has very specific requirements for format, content, and type sizes. Unlike some markets where nutrition labeling is simply based on 100 gram or 100 milliliter amounts, for FDA nutrition charts, a serving size must be declared based on a reference amount for that exact food established by FDA. There's also an additional dual column requirement for products that are in packages that might be consumed in a single sitting. There are also different formats for infant and toddler foods and when there's more than one product in a package. We've pulled together some examples from other countries to illustrate how different the FDA chart is. Here you can see the US FDA chart compared to charts from UK, Australia, and Mexico. Here you can see the US FDA chart compared to charts from Canada, Argentina, and China. Again, very different. So it's obvious to FDA inspectors when a product comes in with a label that is not in compliance with this requirement. Any inspector that sees this mistake is bound to detain the product and refuse it unless the importer petitions for permission to relabel it. Also important to understand that FDA has multiple chart formats that are permitted on food labeling, but subject to certain conditions. To the left, we see a simplified format, which is permitted on certain products like olive oil and bottled water that don't have a lot of nutrient value. On the upper right side of the label, or the panel, at the bottom of the panel, we see two tabular charts that are permitted on certain sized packaging. The first one is permitted on a label panel that is less than 3 inches tall. The other is permitted on certain smaller packages that can't fit the standard chart. And in the middle is the linear format. This is permitted only on very small packaging. So if you choose to use any of these nutrition facts panels, you need to make sure that your package and your product qualify. FDA's newest regulations for nutrition labeling include mandatory dual column formats for containers that are between 200 and 300% of an FDA reference amount for that food, and also in cases where the product is in a unit, like a muffin, that is between 200 and 300% of the reference amount. The chart must show the nutrient values for the serving size, but also have a column for the entire container or unit. This ensures that a consumer is aware of the nutrient values should they eat the entire package or the entire unit. Most foods, except for single ingredient foods, must declare all their ingredients on the package. Most of these ingredients must be declared by their common or usual name. No E numbers, no INS numbers. Now, most of these also have to be declared individually and not grouped together in parentheses. They must be in descending order by weight, but there are some exceptions to these rules for certain ingredients, such as flavors, colors, and some spices. Allergens are an important part of food labeling and a very common cause for product recalls and other similar issues. Accurate allergen declarations are a significant safety and labeling issue. FDA has 9 mandatory food allergens that are required to be disclosed on the labeling: milk, eggs, fish, crustacean but not molluscan shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soybeans, and sesame. You may declare them in parentheses next to the ingredient in the ingredients list, or declare all of them in a contained statement adjacent to that list. FDA recently issued a new guidance document related to allergen labeling that made some dramatic changes to our understanding of what FDA expects companies to declare to meet the requirements of the Food Allergen and Consumer Protection Act. Some of the differences have sent shockwaves through the industry, most notably the removal of coconut from the list of tree allergens, along with beech nut, butternut, chestnut, chinkapin, ginkgo, hickory nut, lychee nut, pili nut, and shea nut. FDA also provided clarification regarding milk from sources other than cows. We've always known that when the term milk was used, FDA expected it to be milk from cows, and milk from other sources should be declared in the ingredients list with that source, such as goat milk or sheep's milk. FDA took this a step further, making it clear that allergen labeling for milk does include milk from other sources, and those sources should also be named in the contained statement, or when it's included parenthetically adjacent to a milk product such as whey or sodium caseinate. FDA made the same statements in the guidance related to the declaration for eggs as well. If not derived from a chicken, you must include the source, such as duck egg, when listing it in the ingredients list, and also when listing it for the purposes of allergen labeling. Every food product label needs to declare either the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. You may choose any of these 3 options to meet this requirement. Note that it must include the actual corporate name and full address, although you may omit the street address if it is found in a local directory. FDA must have a way to contact a responsible party if they discover a problem with the product. While not an FDA requirement, it's important to know that U.S. Customs and Border Protection has a labeling requirement for the country of origin. This is the country where the last substantial transformation took place, and it must appear on all retail food labels. Important to also know, you may only use abbreviations for countries that are deemed acceptable by customs. For example, PRC is not an acceptable abbreviation for China, as a U.S. consumer may not be familiar with it and would not realize that it stands for People's Republic of China. Recently, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, issued new rules regarding the disclosure of bioengineered ingredients. USDA maintains a list of foods that are generally considered to be genetically modified. If your food product has an ingredient on that list, or if you know that any ingredient in your food is the product of bioengineering, then you must disclose it on the label. USDA gives several options, including a symbol that can be used to meet the requirement. And so even though this rule was issued by the USDA, it impacts FDA-regulated product labeling as well. In addition to regulations regarding the mandatory statements that must appear, FDA has a maze of regulations related to other labeling issues such as claims. FDA dictates when such claims can be made. For example, nutrient content claims refer to levels of a nutrient in the food, such as high in fiber, low in fat, and also includes the claim healthy. FDA sets nutrient levels and other conditions that must be met in order for a label to bear the claim. Health claims refer to a risk reduction in disease that may occur due to consumption of the food, such as low sodium diets and hypertension. A health claim must be pre-approved by FDA and is found in regulation. Structure function claims reference effects to the structure or function of the body due to the consumption of the food, such as calcium builds strong bones. These claims are not pre-approved by FDA, but must be truthful and based on the nutritive value of the food. Another common labeling element are additional languages. Note that your labels must have all mandatory statements in English. And if any other language is present, then all mandatory statements must appear in that language too. Now, brand names or mottos may be exempt from this requirement though, as they do not convey material information about the product. But if any of the mandatory statements we've discussed is present in another language, you will need to reproduce them all in that language. Now, due to a strong marketing desire by consumers for clean labeling, organic foods are now a significant part of the U.S. market. In order to make this claim, your food will need to be certified in most cases by an agent that is accredited by the USDA. There are some memoranda of understanding between other markets. So if you're in the EU, for example, you may be exempt from this, but you want to verify this fact before you send. Now, the claim itself is going to be based on the percentage of organic ingredients that's found in the product, and usually the agent's information must appear on the labeling. In December of 2024, FDA issued a new rule that drastically changes the requirements to call a food healthy on the labeling. Companies will have until February 25th, 2028 to update their labeling to incorporate the new regulation. The previous regulation focused on individual nutrients and required certain low levels of fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium, as well as mandating that the product contain at least 10% of the recommended daily value of a nutrient from a specific list, such as calcium, iron, and dietary fiber. Now, the old rule was issued in the 1990s, and so while there have been some modifications in the last 10 years or so, the rule has still reflected outdated thinking about nutrition. The new regulation incorporates a better understanding of human nutrition and focuses on foods as a whole, the need for healthy dietary patterns, and shifts the focus away from levels of individual nutrients. Sorry about that. The new regulation does not mention nutrient levels at all. It's focused entirely on food groups. So a food will qualify if it contains as its only ingredients, other than water, vegetables, fruit, whole grains, fat-free or low-fat dairy, lean meat, seafood, eggs, beans, peas, lentils, nuts, or seeds. Interestingly, many of these would not have qualified under the old rule, even though we now recognize the importance of healthy fats in the diet, such as is found in seafood like salmon and nuts. Now, the new regulation establishes what it calls food group equivalents, or FGE, based on these food categories plus soy. So for example, for vegetables, a food group equivalent is 1/2 cup of the equivalent vegetable. Now, a food with multiple ingredients can qualify for healthy if it meets certain conditions and contains certain amounts of these food group equivalents. Also, certain oils like olive oil that are low in saturated fat may meet the requirements to claim healthy, which they could not do under the old rules. The same is true for water, tea, and coffee, which could not under the old rules because they didn't have any nutrients at all on FDA's list. These can now be labeled as healthy if they have less than 5 calories per serving and per reference amount that's been established by FDA. The challenging part, though, is that the regulation does not provide a way to easily determine what is meant by equivalence. So for example, the rule talks about dried vegetable powders being eligible under this rule when you add it to a food, but how would you actually calculate a 1/2 cup of that, of an equivalent vegetable? So FDA has stated that they intend to issue guidance soon to help industry make these calculations. The agency is also conducting consumer research on a healthy symbol that may be applied to packaging so that a consumer can quickly determine if a food meets these requirements. Now, front of package labeling has been present in the marketplace for quite a few years, but it's always been voluntary. Now, there are many ways that it's been added to food labels. Some systems have used symbols to characterize the overall nutrient value of a food. Others have focused on individual nutrient levels. Now, up until now, FDA has only objected if the agency has determined that the front of package statements are false or misleading, or if they are in violation of the regulations that govern nutrient content claims. However, in its mission to help consumers make healthier food choices, particularly at the point of purchase, FDA has now issued a proposed rule to require front of package labeling on most food products. FDA's proposed rule will require a nutrition info box that lists the percent daily values of saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, and characterizes them as low, medium, or high. So this will be required on most foods intended for people aged 4 years and older, so not required for toddler or infant food. There will also be a voluntary declaration of calories that can be made adjacent to the box. FDA will have special labeling provisions for certain packages, such as small packages, packages that declare as packaged as well as prepared, like cake mixes, and then aggregate packages that have more than one product listed in the nutrition facts label. Now, right now, this is a proposed rule, so the public can send comments to FDA up until May 16th of this year. Note that this is only proposed, though. It is not final, and it could change. And it could change dramatically, which is what we saw with the change to the nutrition facts label in 2016. The final version was very different than what FDA had proposed in 2014. So please do not add this to your food labels yet. Here we see examples of the proposed front of package boxes. At the top left is the standard box, with the small package box at the bottom left. The voluntary declaration of calories is shown in the other two examples from FDA. These boxes will have to be placed in the upper third of the principal display panel. So that's the panel that faces the consumer at the point of purchase. The levels are defined as follows. Low is less than or equal to 5% of the recommended daily value. Medium is 6 to 19% of that daily value, and high would be greater than or equal to 20% of the daily value. So companies need to be vigilant in ensuring that their labels meet FDA's requirements. These are 5 common mistakes, many of which I recently found on a detention notice for a company that did not do a compliance check before shipping. They have 5 different products sitting in port, many with these labeling violations, and no easy way to get them relabeled. So it's very common for other markets to permit declaring ingredients by ER and INS numbers, but that's not the case here. It's a very common mistake that we see. And we often see companies that are using nutrition charts that are only permitted on small packages. not understanding the limitations of their use. Because a majority of the world relies on the metric system, many labels arrive to the US without the mandatory declaration in ounces or fluid ounces. It's also very common for labels to bear claims such as like high in vitamin A, but the product does not have enough of that nutrient to qualify for the claim. And last but not least, if there's any non-English statement on your label, you will probably need to reproduce all of the mandatory statements in that language. So we hope that the information that we've presented gives you a good overview of how to check your product's formulation and labeling to determine if it will meet FDA's requirements. If you still find that the rules and regulations are too confusing and want an expert to look over your products before you ship, Registrar Corp is here to help. Registrar Corp has many solutions to help you make sure your labels meet FDA's requirements. We offer varying levels of assistance with our full label compliance service, label check report, nutrition facts, alcoholic nutrition labeling and recipe managed software, and ingredient review services. We also offer consulting by the hour if you have any other questions or concerns that require an experienced regulatory affairs professional. As I mentioned before, it's critical to make sure that your formulation consists only of ingredients that are permitted in the U.S. market, as well as making sure that the labeling is correct. Our full label compliance service gives you one-on-one assistance with an experienced regulatory specialist who will do a complete evaluation of your ingredients and labeling. We conduct a thorough analysis of the label for each of the mandatory statements we've discussed today, and then we'll make recommendations for changes to bring your label and your product into compliance. We issue a report that includes all of our recommendations, and we will provide you with a print-ready graphic that is in compliance with FDA labeling requirements. The service also includes a 30-day period where you can ask questions and an extra round of graphic changes to the revised label at no additional charge. Registrar Corp takes compliance very seriously. We put hours and hours of research into our labeling services and stand by our work. So this is our promise to our clients. Any client that uses our label compliance service can count on our continued support as long as they use our revised label. If FDA questions the compliance of any label we produce, Registrar Corp will intervene at no cost to you. We will communicate with FDA on your behalf and explain how the labeling regulations were applied to your product label. This usually involves submitting what's called testimony of admissibility, and that includes all of the regulatory citations that we used to develop your compliant label. We have found that sometimes FDA officers may mistakenly stop products that are actually in compliance. In such cases, Registrar Corp intervenes to secure release of the product. We will do this for as long as you use our label, no expiration date. This will actually usually happen a few times a year. FDA officers are smart and professional, but they are not always labeling specialists. So let Registrar Corp be your partner in ensuring that you have trouble-free exportation to the US. Now, if you're feeling pretty confident that your label is compliant, but still want the reassurance of a group of experienced regulatory professionals looking it over, Registrar Corp offers our label check report option. Our team will look over the 10 mandatory elements that should appear on your conventional food label and give you guidance regarding any potential issues that we find, and instructions on what changes you should make prior to exporting it to the US. A report will summarize the changes, and you will receive 30 minutes of consultation after delivery to go over our findings. If you're feeling pretty confident about your labeling, but do want some help with that complicated nutrition facts label, Registrar Corp offers a service that will give you one-on-one assistance from a regulatory specialist who will help you figure out the proper reference amount and serving size for your product, as well as the proper modified label format that may be permitted for your product in that package. We will provide you with a print-ready graphic and a report that details each recommendation and regulation that was used to develop your nutrition facts label. Registrar Corp also offers a do-it-yourself solution for companies to produce their own nutrition labeling for the U.S. as well as other markets. Our a la calc nutrition labeling and recipe management software allows you to easily enter a single recipe and create nutrition charts for the US, United Kingdom, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. A la calc has nutrient information for thousands of ingredients from 9 verified databases, so it can replace lab analysis for your foods. The system also allows for unlimited recipes with easy ways to organize and monitor your offerings, manage costings, and optimize recipes to reach certain nutrient goals, such as low fat or low sodium. It's an online platform subscription-based service and perfect for manufacturers, caterers, food service organizations, and any other business that requires accurate nutrient information for its food products. For companies that are still in the process of developing their formulations or that are concerned that their ingredients may not be approved in the U.S., Registrar Corp's Ingredients Review Service can provide peace of mind prior to export. We will review all of the ingredients in your products to verify that the ingredients are either affirmed as safe, approved as food additives, or approved as color additives by FDA. Save yourself the heartache of a refused shipment by ensuring that your ingredients are permitted before you export. If you have needs that don't fit neatly into one of our defined services, Registrar Corp offers customized consulting with our subject matter experts to help you solve your most complex product challenges. From a single-hour consult for a simple question to long-term regulatory support, we can tailor our assistance to help you and your firm achieve compliance and minimize your risk of enforcement action from FDA. Registrar Corp's assistance is not limited just to the US FDA. If you are sending products into the Canadian and Mexican markets, we can assist you with your labeling for these countries as well. We offer the Label Comply and Label Check services for Canada. We also offer Label Comply and the Constancia approval for Mexico. If you export to these markets, please reach out to us for assistance to ensure that you have trouble-free shipments and a smooth supply chain to these markets as well. Now, if you're unsure whether or not your product labels are compliant, we can help. You may send your product labels to us for a free assessment. We will check to see if they appear to have any compliance issues related to the mandatory labeling requirements we've discussed today. We may also be able to help you quickly determine if there's an illegal color additive or some other ingredient that's not permitted. Our team of regulatory advisors will provide you with our comments and can give you information regarding our services in case you need to change your labels or formulation before you ship them to the US, Canada, or Mexico. We have many other ways that we can help you as you export your foods to the US. Registrar Corp offers a full range of compliance services, all of which are fixed fee. We can assist you with many FDA requirements, such as food facility registration and US agent, prior notice, low acid and canned food requirements, food safety plans, and services to meet the requirements of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program for US importers. We can also help you if your products are being detained or on import alert. If you get detained, don't give up right away. Send us the FDA's notice of detention, called a notice of action, for a free assessment, and we can see if and how you may be able to get them released. We look forward to assisting you with successful exportation of your products to these markets. And we have a special discount for you all as our thanks to attending our webinar today. You will receive $200 off the full Label Comply service or $100 off the Label Check service between now and April 1st. Simply mention it to your regulatory advisor and the discount will be applied. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. We really do appreciate it. And I hope that you found the information today helpful. And with that, we'll open up our webinar for any questions that you may have. Please feel free to add them to the Q&A box at the top of the screen. Unfortunately, we're not able to actually unmute participants. So if you've raised your hand for a question, please put it in the Q&A box. Also, if you've put anything in the chat box, we're not able to really monitor that for the Q&A. So please move those over to the Q&A box that you'll see at the top of your screen. Okay. And so with that, let me go ahead and check and see what our questions are. We'll go ahead and try and start with the oldest question first. Okay. So the first question, do you need to submit labels to the FDA prior to shipment? Good question. So some agencies do require a label approval. The TTB for alcoholic beverages and the USDA for certain products have to go through a label approval process, but FDA does not for food products. So the challenge is that then they expect you to automatically know what all the rules are without any sort of affirmation from the agency. So if you then ship and import, the officer sees that the products aren't in compliance, then you're detained and you're out of luck. So we strongly recommend making sure that your products are compliant before you ship, because there's no formal process by which FDA will actually approve your labels. Okay. All right, let's see. Forgive me, let me go ahead and grab the next question. Let's see. Does Registrar Corp have any experience in labeling for food or veterinary additives? So we are able to help actually with both pet food as well as human food and animal feed. And so we can help with products that are either intended for general retail sale, or if they're bulk and being sent to another manufacturer or a food service. The requirements are a little bit different. There are a few more exemptions when you're sending to either a bulk product to a manufacturer or to a food service, you're selling to like hospitals or cafeterias. The rules are a little bit different, and so we can actually help you with all of those. Okay, next question. Is nutrition labeling necessary for food additives or only for consumer food? Generally speaking, nutrition labeling is only going to be required for finished products that are destined for retail consumers. But it is important to understand that if you have made any claims on your labeling, so for example, even if you're sending to like a hospital or a cafeteria and you've claimed that a product is low fat, you lose the exemption and you'll need to have nutrition labeling on that. Okay. The next question is about coconuts and pine nuts are not allergens in Europe, and coconuts will not be in the US anymore. Will pine nuts also be removed? At this point, it appears that pine nuts still appear on the list that FDA just issued. Literally, it was just this past month. And like I mentioned, it took everybody by surprise that they all of a sudden, with very little fanfare, just modified this list of tree nuts. So I believe pine nuts are still on it, but coconut is not. All right. Let's see. Our next question. Does Registrar have experience with food and dietary supplement ingredients going business to business and not business to consumers? So yes, so these types of shipments of food, generally speaking, they usually will have to have all of the labeling that we've discussed, with the exception of the nutrition facts label, because they're not intended for a consumer. And so you want to make sure that you're meeting all of those requirements before you send any sort of bulk ingredient shipments. Okay. So the next question is, what is the reason for not accepting stevia in the US market, even though it is a natural product? So stevia is acceptable in the market as long as it meets certain purity specifications. And so there's a certain amount of the steviol glycosides that have to be present. Crude stevia is the subject of this import alert. So early on, when stevia was first being marketed in the US, FDA had concerns about the purity and it meeting certain specifications, which is why there's the import alert. So we recommend that companies maintain documentation to show these specifications, so if the product is stopped, you can easily present that information to the FDA officer and get the shipment released. Okay, let's see. see, our next question. With a single ingredient product and that ingredient being an allergen, does this must the ingredient be placed in bold in the ingredients list, or does the name of the product suffice if it contains that ingredient? Okay, so if you have a single ingredient product and the name of the commodity itself, also includes the name of the allergen, then you should be meeting the requirements of the of FAL-CPA. However, if there's any question at all, like if it's a whey protein or something like that, then you absolutely need to make sure that you're declaring the allergens. It's certainly a case where the more bold and prominent, the better. Just to make sure that either the manufacturer to whom you're selling it or a consumer that's buying it is very well aware of the allergen being present. Even beyond a labeling requirement, just from a liability standpoint, you want to make sure that it's there. Okay, let's see. Okay, so question about sharing the registration of the webinar. So the recording will actually be sent to everybody, so you should be able to refer back to this if you need to, and you're always welcome to reach out to us. We have a 24-hour chat feature on our webpage. If you come up with any questions about FDA compliance, please do feel free to reach out to us. We have scores of people available to assist industry, and always look very forward to helping companies with the marketing of their products in the US and meeting any requirements that FDA may have for you. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the next question is about traces of allergen. Are they still not mandatory? So there's a nuance to allergen labeling. The legal requirement is if you have an intentionally added ingredient that is an allergen or has a protein from a major allergen, then that is what kicks in the requirement for allergen labeling under the Food Allergen Consumer Protection Act. When you have traces that are there due to cross-contamination, so for example, if you are using the same conveyor belt that conveys peanuts and then you're using it for a different product where some peanut traces may end up in the product, that declaration, which is usually something like may contain peanuts or produced on equipment that produces peanuts, that's actually called advisory labeling. It's not required at this point. And FDA cautions companies that they should be very vigilant about making sure that cross-contamination doesn't occur. However, most companies have figured out that due to the liability of this, unintentional allergen being present, they will, based on their own legal counsel, include these sorts of statements. And FDA certainly acknowledges that this may be prudent. So if there is any chance of a trace allergen being present that's not named on the label, we strongly recommend including advisory labeling on that product package, just to be on the safe side. Okay, let's see. Okay, next question. Are there any special considerations for the use of caramel color? So if memory serves, I believe caramel is actually just approved generally for addition to food. I don't think it has any limitations on the types of products that it can be added to. However, it's always worth checking the regulation to see if there are any particular specifications related to the purity of it and that sort of thing. Also, colors, when they are declared in an ingredients list, usually will have to be designated as a color. So you would put caramel and then color next to it to highlight to the consumer that it's being used as a color additive. Okay, let's see. Okay, next question. Lots of questions about allergens. I see that us talking about allergens brought out a lot of people who are interested in this, which is good because it's a very important issue for food labeling. I actually just did an analysis of all of the recalls that FDA has issued that FDA issued in 2024, and of the labeling related ones, the overwhelming majority of them were related to allergen labeling. So it's very important that people get this right on their labeling. So the question is, my product is considered an allergen in Europe. Is it necessary to declare allergens in the US? So if that allergen is also an allergen per FDA, then of course you're going to have to declare it. There is also, though, a tricky part with the way FDA enforces this. They do not want allergens that are not one of their 9 to be declared with that contained statement. So for example, rye or barley or even sulfites that are not part of the 9 should not be in the contained statement. And even though it seems kind of crazy that they would not let you declare additional allergens, the agency has stated that they just don't want it confusing, and taking away from the 9 core food allergens that are part of this requirement. So there have actually been warning letters to companies. I actually helped a company that had rye declared in their contained statement, and FDA said it was misbranded and that was not permitted. So do a careful check. Don't declare an allergen that's not one of the 9 in your contained statement if that's what you're using to declare your allergens. Okay, let's see. Okay, next question. Do I have to have the package marked with the E symbol for weight? So this presumably is related to the E symbol that appears on packaging in the European Union, and FDA does not have any sort of symbol like that goes with the net quantity statement. Interestingly, also, FDA has spacing requirements around the net quantity statement. You're supposed to have the equivalent, basically, of the height of the letters above and below to make it distinct, as well as to the right and the left. So the E symbol, even though I've never seen FDA detained for this, the E symbol actually violates that spacing constraint. So if you do not have to put the E symbol on the label, definitely don't, because it could be considered intervening and violating the spacing requirement that FDA has for the net quantity statement on packaging. All right, let's see. Okay, next question. Can a product include 2 types of nutrition values? So I'm wondering if this is actually in reference to having like 2 different charts, like for example, having the US FDA and then maybe a nutrition chart for the EU or the UK or Canada or another market. Unfortunately, we have seen where FDA has detained products, even though it had a perfectly legitimate nutrition facts, in compliance with FDA's requirements, but also declared a chart for another market. And so FDA definitely frowns upon that. It makes it difficult for companies because it means that you can't really combine, the US FDA requirements with the requirements for another market and then use that label for both markets. So because of this, we strongly recommend that you have a label that is dedicated solely to the US market, or that you have an attractive sticker fix, an over label that can be used so that only the US FDA information is showing when the product comes to the US. Okay, let's see. Okay, next question is about flavors. Can we not use the term nature identical flavoring? And how do we mention that a product contains a flavor in the order of ingredients? So, excellent question. FDA does not recognize the term nature identical flavoring. And so even though, from my understanding, those are the same chemical structure as the natural flavor, from the actual, strawberry or whatever, FDA still considers it to be artificial flavor since it was not extracted, from that actual strawberry. So unfortunately, they have to be declared as artificial flavoring. And so this will impact then it could impact the statement of identity for your product. If you're claiming strawberry shortcake, you might have to put artificially flavored. Those sorts of impacts will be felt on other parts of the labeling. Now, as far as it goes in the order of ingredients, it can be, the requirement that you declare the common or usual name for every single ingredient does not apply to flavors. But I would caution you that if a color additive is present in that flavor ingredient that you're buying from your supplier, you will want to declare that on the label, because we have seen detentions where FDA has, stopped, say, that strawberry shortcake product that has strawberry flavoring added, and there was a red color to the flavor, but not in the list. FDA has detained products like that for not declaring a color additive. And it's even worse if it turns out that the product or the color additive was not permitted in the United States. So we have seen that happen on occasion. So do be very, very careful when you're using flavors. The biggest thing that occurs to me is that keep an eye out if there's any color being added to that flavor ingredient when you buy it. Okay, it's 11 o'clock right now, but if people want to hang out for a bit longer, then I'm happy to continue answering questions for a little while longer. Let's see. Okay. Okay, next question. Is it mandatory to include the Latin name of the fish on the label? So, strictly speaking, just the common or usual name needs to be declared. However, seafood is sort of funny in that there are a lot of names that are used in other markets or in other areas of the world that FDA doesn't recognize for certain species. FDA has what's called the seafood list, and there they give the acceptable market names and common names for a ton of different species of fish. And so what you want to do is check your species against the seafood list to then make sure that the name you're using is considered appropriate as the common name or an acceptable market name by FDA. So classic example, in some areas of the world, rainbow trout is called salmon. But if you put salmon on the label of your rainbow trout and send it to the United States, that's misbranding. So you want to definitely double check before you send any seafood that you're using the proper name per FDA. Okay, let's see. Are E numbers for preservatives prohibited as well? So yes, preservatives will need to be declared by their common name. If you include the E number as well, that could be considered intervening. FDA frowns on that. American consumers don't know what E numbers are, and so it's not considered part of the common name. Preservatives also have to have an additional declaration. So, for example, if you're using potassium sorbate, then you need to put preservative in parentheses next to it, or mold inhibitor, or to preserve freshness, or some statement that makes it clear that it's functioning as a preservative in the formulation. Okay. Now, I see some people are raising hands. I'm so sorry, I don't have a way to have you be able to ask your questions that way. So please do put them in the Q&A box. And I'm happy to try and get to as many of these as I can this morning. Okay, let's see. Okay, regarding Canada, which label requirements are different for the USA, and is there some kind of exemption? So for Canada, if you're talking about shipping a product from Canada to the US, just like any other product, it's going to have to meet all of the US FDA labeling requirements. There isn't any sort of a memorandum of understanding that recognizes Canadian labels in the US market, and vice versa. If you're in the US and then you're shipping to Canada, our understanding is that you need to have Canadian labeling, which is very different. They have a different nutrition facts, valeur nutritive chart. You usually have to have French, all over the label since it's a bilingual nation. So if you need help with preparing labels for the Canadian market, we have services, as I've mentioned, to help with that, and specialists that specialize specifically in Canadian labeling. So we can help you with that as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, so there's a question regarding the high content disclosure statements when using certain nutrient content claims. Are there requirements for calorie and sugar content besides requirement for the no added sugar claim? So this is a question related to nutrient content claims in general. So if you're making like a high fiber, low fat, low sodium type of claim, then there are certain levels of, if I remember correctly, it's fat, saturated fat, sodium. There may be some others where if you hit that level, you can still make the claim, but you need to disclose that. So classic example is with vegetable oil. vegetable oil is cholesterol free. However, vegetable oil has a lot of fat and may have a lot of saturated fat. And so if you make that cholesterol-free claim, then you will need to have a disclosure that says to see the nutrition facts label for that fat or saturated fat content. Off the top of my head, I don't believe that the calorie or sugar content is part of that general disclosure requirement. However, there are some claims like high fiber that may have other disclosure requirements. And so it always pays to do a check through the CFR, through the section of the CFR that governs nutrient content claims, to make sure that there isn't an extra labeling component that needs to be added to your label if you're making a nutrient content claim. Okay. See a question if we'll get the PowerPoint. We're not able to send out the actual PowerPoint slides. However, we will be sending you a link, to the recording. These are usually put on our website as well. We have webinars on demand that anybody can access, and so definitely do feel free to access all of those as well. Okay. Another question about nutrient content claims. We are unsure if we can claim high in omega-3. The Code of Federal Regulations does not have a clear answer, and in the EU, we are allowed to claim this and want to make sure we can in the US too. I'm very glad you asked this question because the term high in, so when you talk about something being a good source or high in a certain fiber or whatever, enriched, rich in vitamin C, these types of claims, because they imply a certain level of a nutrient, they can only be used, generally speaking, on nutrients that have a daily reference value or recommended daily value from FDA. And so omega-3 does not have one of those. So you cannot declare high in omega-3. There's a slightly modified version of the ALA omega claim. And generally speaking, you usually are allowed if you just declare a quantitative amount. So if you said each serving has 300 milligrams of omega-3, where you're giving that actual quantitative amount, that usually is acceptable. But if you just claim it's high in omega-3 without disclosing that quantitative amount, you're implying it reaches a level that FDA has not defined. And so for that reason, you're not allowed to actually make that claim, but you can put just, 300 milligrams of omega-3 or a quantitative amount. Usually that is acceptable for these types of nutrients that don't have those daily values established by FDA. Okay, let's see. Sorry, let me find another one. Let's see. Okay, can you explain a little bit more about the organic product requirements? Again, organic is actually regulated, that claim is regulated by our U.S. Department of Agriculture, which makes sense since it deals with agriculture, generally speaking. And so they have a requirement that the product has to be certified by an agent that they recognize and they've accredited. So the first one that comes to mind for me is EcoCert. I think they're pretty well known for certifying organic products. So we usually recommend, contacting a certifying agent that is accredited by USDA. There are some labeling requirements depending on the percent of organic ingredients in your product, without or not including water and salt. And you will have to have the certifying agent named on the label. Now, USDA has established what are called memoranda of understanding. So most notably with the EU, where they recognize that the organic requirements in the EU are comparable. And so to remove a barrier to trade, they are, in essence, recognizing it sort of automatically. There may be some paperwork, I think, upon entry. So you'll want to get with your customs broker or talk to your home country's whatever agency oversees organic in your home country, just to see what the requirements are. But there are some memoranda of understanding between the USDA and some countries regarding recognizing organic status. Okay, next question. Does our plant and the other two ones have to have registrar as an agent? Okay, so I think this person may just be informing me that we're serving as U.S. agent for your plant, in which case I have to say thank you very much. Registrar Corp, we now have over 20,000 companies where we're serving as U.S. agent. If you are a non-U.S. company, you are required to have a U.S. agent as part of your food facility registration. As I mentioned, we're extremely proud to serve as U.S. agent, and we take this responsibility very seriously for about 20,000 companies across the world. And so if you are looking to export and you're interested in those services, please do let us know. There are additional benefits that come with it. You have access to free prior notices. You have access to, simply coming and asking questions, kind of like we're doing today, but you'll have a regulatory advisor who can help answer simple questions that you might have about the process and help you prevent any sort of mistakes, as you start exporting to the U.S. The last thing you want is a detention or being placed on an import alert. So it's important to get those questions answered before you start shipping. Okay, let's see. Okay, so question about country of origin. And so it says, if selling sachets of barbecue sauce that are added to a chicken wing kit, must all the sachets have the country of origin or just the outer case label? Each case will contain 200 sachets. So the U.S. Customs and Border Protection regulation is written such that the ultimate purchaser, which usually means the retail consumer if it's a retail product, can see the country of origin at that point of purchase. So if that case is what's being sold to the retail consumer, then that could have the country of origin and the individual sachets would not have to. However, if those individual sachets are being sold directly to a consumer, then they would have to have it. Now, if you're talking about a sachet, so if you're sending a case of 200 sachets to somebody who's assembling the kit and that sachet's going into the kit, then it's possible that the sachet does not have to have it, but that kit label, so whatever has the sachet of barbecue sauce and the seasonings or whatever else, that kit label would have to declare the country of origin for that barbecue sauce sachet. And then also the country of origin of any other of the components within the kit that might have a different country of origin. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we can keep going for a few more minutes if everybody wants to hang with me. Let's see. Okay, are energy claims regulated according to FDA? And when can you actually claim an energy bar? So, energy is a synonym for calories. So a lot of this will depend on how exactly, you're using the term energy. So an energy bar that gives calories, that maybe gives nutrients like vitamins and minerals that have been demonstrated to provide, energy or to help the body function better, cases like that, then generally speaking, that's probably going to be okay. There's not a specific regulation for energy claim, but it would be considered a structure function claim, which is permitted on a conventional food product. But on conventional food products, it has to be based off of nutritive value. So if the energy claim is based off something that is not nutritive, like if it's off of guarana or like a particular herb, or even if it's based off caffeine content, it becomes a little more, uncertain whether or not that would be considered appropriate under FDA's rules for structure function claims and conventional foods. Okay, it is important, actually, an interesting nuance is that dietary supplements do not have the same limitation. So if you have a product that is a dietary supplement, your structure function claims can be based off of non-nutritive ingredients as well as nutritive ingredients. Let's see. Okay, next question. Do you have experience with medical foods? So medical foods are a very, very small subset of the conventional food type products. So The part about medical foods that it's important to know is that by definition, a medical food, generally speaking, has to be intended for a patient that has a medical condition that makes it difficult for them to like metabolize, certain necessary nutrients or things like that, or they have, they're subject completely to tube feeding, and they can't consume food in the normal manner. We see that FDA has issued warning letters to a lot of companies that market foods as medical foods when they are intended for diseases like anorexia or cancer or other, serious disease conditions. And the definition of medical food includes the condition that this disease, the needs can't be met by a normal diet. And so, like, think, for example, if you can't metabolize a certain amino acid that is necessary to sustain life, if your medical food is providing that, then that might qualify. But things like, hypertension or cancer or anorexia or diseases that can be addressed with a normal diet, those foods cannot be considered medical foods. So you want to evaluate very carefully. It may be that you have to market that product either as a dietary supplement or as a conventional food product. Okay, and I think I'll have time for one more question, and then we'll try and contact everyone that has the other questions. And you're also welcome to reach out to us. If you sent in a question and we were not able to get to it today, it looks like we have a lot of questions. And so we're absolutely happy to try and answer any questions. Once we've ended the webinar, please do reach out to us. We'll try and go ahead and do one more. Let's see, we sell different chocolate figures in the same bag of 150 grams. We can only have one big figure of 150 grams or 5 pieces of 30 grams. Can we have the same nutrition facts for both products? Okay, so this is where it gets kind of interesting, if I understand the question correctly. The reference amount for candy is 30 grams. So if you have 5 pieces in a bag, that's really simple. It's, one piece, 30 grams, and then that's going to be your serving size for your nutrition facts chart. If you had different sized units, so for example, if you had, 3 units of 50 grams a piece, or if you had variable numbers of units, then it kind of changes because FDA's regulations, when you have distinct units, the serving size depends on how big an individual unit is compared to the reference amount. And so it becomes very, very specific. If a unit is less than 50%, then you have to calculate it this way. If it's between 50 and 67% of that reference amount, that 30 grams, then you have to calculate it a different way. If it's between 67 and 200%, then you have to calculate it a different way. So unfortunately, I can't give a quick answer to this, but understand that you need to, if you're developing your nutrition chart, then you're going to need to really look closely at the regulations that govern how you determine the serving size for an individual unit based on those percentage amounts. Okay. So with that, I'll go ahead, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to end our webinar. But again, please do reach out if we were not able to get to your questions, or you have any other concerns about marketing your food products in the U.S. or any of the other products that we're able to assist with. Note that Registrar Corp has services related to conventional foods, dietary supplements, cosmetics, over-the-counter drugs, medical devices. We're able to help with all of these different types of products. My team reviews labeling and ingredients for all those different types of products. We're happy to help you with any FDA-regulated product that you might be sending to the U.S. So please do reach out to us for help. Again, we have a 24-hour, free hotline where you can ask questions about FDA requirements. We're always here to help. And with that, thank you, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.